Hello, everybody, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to the 87th edition of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And welcome again. I've got another weeknight show, which is always fun. Sometimes I slide these in when I've had some rescheduling. And Brittany, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
So I'm really happy to get her on here. As you guys know, toxic work environments and just overall command climate, as we call it in the Navy, is just something I'm very, very passionate about. And it's definitely a mental health issue. It's a relationship issue. It's just something that I think we've got to address. So Brittany's military background in aviation maintenance as a first enlisted Air Force operational test propulsion specialist, then later as an F-35 propulsion manager, gave her that experience and that background in different environments. And she had her own difficulties, even with poor work climate. So after a period of time, she left the corporate world behind, and now she coaches companies using radical honesty. And her posts are amazing. So if you guys are not on LinkedIn and you haven't checked Brittany out, I do link to her in the show notes. Please take a look at some of her posts. She's making us all think a little bit more about how important it is to have a healthy environment. And she's very honest and very blunt in the way she does her writings. And so I appreciate that. Work
Thank you.
culture consultant. Yes, her company guides company executives to elevate psychological safety for employees through highly customized emotional intelligence training and culture SWOT analysis. She supports executives by evaluating their workplace environment so they can identify which elements of their culture aren't working and reprogram outdated systems. She then helps leadership teams strategically humanize their internal processes, empowering them to restructure and rebrand their culture so that employees can flourish at work and executives can gain and retain the top talent. She's raising our emotional intelligence, which requires that we assess our environments and the way we participate with them, and then evaluate how we can show up with greater empathy and humanity, and how we can serve from a place of connectedness rather than divisiveness. I love your bio. So written. It's written
You.
so well. Emotionally intelligent leadership teams build happy, healthy, and unified work cultures, thus creating a cohesive space where employees' unique gifts can freely shine. Thank you for coming on the show, Brittany.
Thank you.
So, first question I always ask any guests who have served in the military, where are you originally from and why did you join the Air Force?
So I'm from a really podunk town in Arizona called Topak. It has like less than 12 or 1300 people. We're like a river rat people. And it was, I hated it when I was there, but when I got older, I can look back and appreciate a lot of things. But there wasn't a lot there. And I just always knew, and all my, best friends said that growing up, I always talked about going to the Air Force. So this is something that has like, I don't even remember, but it's always gone very, very far back for me in school. And I knew even when I got into high school, like there was not much there for me. So I better do something with my life. And I felt like the Air Force could help me get school, travel, and just like get some great experiences. And my plan was to be a lifer. Didn't end
Mm.
up that way, but yeah.
So, why did you choose aviation?
What was that? Sorry.
Why did you choose aviation maintenance?
Oh, so my dad was always in the mechanic world, trucks, and we did a lot of off-road stuff, and I always like enjoyed like being a mechanic in that way, and I just felt like, you know, I wanted to be like an A10 jet engine mechanic, like when I
Mhm.
was a kid. I'm like, oh, that just seems really cool, and then I just picked that.
So, tell me a little bit about what some of the things that you experienced in the working world before you decided to be a work culture consultant, because I think that is what influenced you to branch into this whole other direction. And I want to know a little bit about some of those early experiences that shaped you into the person you are now.
Throughout I did 8 years in the Air Force, and I had some really great leadership and then some really bad managers, because I won't even give them the title leader because they're so bad. And and I just, I saw what happens when you have great leadership and amazing productivity, and like what happens. But I also saw the opposite. I had my own personal experiences that even maybe the climate was, decent. I specifically got treated a certain way that was really, really bad. And we've kind of talked offline about some of that stuff. But there was that. Then I got out and went into the government contracting space, DOD, DOE, and NASA. Saw the same thing there. Even on the civilian side, if you have great leadership, things will go great. If you have bad management, it's just hell in a handbasket. So one of the last places I was at was a NASA subcontractor, and the CEO was just a genuine, all uses of that definition, narcissist. He would scream, type spit in people's faces, just a terrible person. My boss tried her best to shield us, but again, it didn't really matter. She tried her best, but there's only so much you can do when the top is so toxic. So, anyways, she got a new job, quit that morning. We found out, and he looks at me and he's like, "You were in the military, right?" And I was like, "What the hell does that have to do with anything?" Um, I didn't say that. That was all my inside voice. And I was
Yes.
like, "Yes." And he's like, "You're going to come work for me now." Like, I was going to come take her spot and I was like, in my mind, I was like, "Oh no." And I just said, "Yes, sir." But I went and packed my bags, or packed my desk up in a box, and left. It was a little bit of a spicy leaving, but left because there was no way. I was like behind the trailer calling my boyfriend at the time, just like, "I can't do this I had a panic attack. I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore."
Right.
And anyways, I had 6 months of a hiatus that I took, not working on purpose. Like, I saved enough money. I'm like, I don't want to end up in this situation again. And I just did a lot of soul searching. I even went to a Tony Robbins seminar. I did a lot of like, what can I do? And ended up with work culture consultant. And here we are now.
Well, wow, what a story. And it's important to note that toxic work environments are not one size fits all, like you said. There's some of them that have sort of a low level of toxicity, and there's some that have a very high level. And I think as a work culture consultant, it's important that you can go in there and at any level try to do what you can to see where the issues are and where the friction points are, and help companies along, because I think that a lot of times we think it's only the extreme cases that we hear about, but
Mhm.
every work environment I think can benefit from a consultant like yourself, correct, who can come in and see things from an outside perspective and maybe interview all the employees and get their hopefully brutally honest opinion about the way things are running and how they could be better, right?
Oh, for sure. Most 99% of my clients actually are already have great cultures, and they want good cultures, and they want to go to great. They already care about their people, which is fantastic. And I also, as a business owner, want to have clients that are on the same page as me. I don't want to be fighting you every inch of the way.
Mhm.
So having clients that align with you is really important. Um, but yeah, they already care about the people, and they just want to go from good to great. Whereas if a toxic company was to have a situation and they wanted to hire me, most likely it would be because a CEO came in, inherited a crap
Sure.
storm, and wanted help with it. And then I would absolutely, be there for them.
Right. So tell me, since you've had some experiences with these poor working climates, what would you say are some of the key indicators of a toxic work environment? Like when somebody first sets into an office, how
Mhm.
how can they tell that the culture is something's off?
People within leadership positions don't portray any leadership skills at
Mhm.
all. um, Usually the vibe when you know and it some people are not on the same page as me intuitively, in terms of, like, sometimes you can just pick up on vibes, but
Mhm.
usually when you walk into a place, it just doesn't feel good. You're eventually going to start seeing the signs, and they're going to start coming in quick, and within a month you're probably going to know that you made an unfortunate mistake.
Mhm.
Just lack of teamwork, pettiness. There's no cohesion. Everyone's for themselves.
Yeah, they're just kind of working in silos. They're not consulting with one another about the work to be done.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think that you can just tell the moment you step in that there's something off, but
Hmm.
then it's trying to get to the root of that is sometimes the hardest part because sometimes I think it's the leaders aren't even aware that it's happening, like the people at the very top, because
Hmm.
it's the middle management maybe that is,
Right.
um,
That,
yeah.
yeah, they're the ones like maybe making it worse, and so like, when I do SWOT analysis and do these employee surveys, a lot of people are like, oh, those don't matter. Well, you're right, they don't matter unless you have leadership who wants to actually do something with those surveys.
Mhm.
That happened in the military a lot. I don't know about the Navy, but I'm sure it's probably the same situation. Like the Air Force would have these climate surveys and they wouldn't do anything with them. So we're
Right.
all just like, what is the point of this? This is a waste of time. And you don't get these transparent answers because um, people would figure out who said what, and then people aren't as honest. You don't get that candid feedback that you need because the best consultants that you have, not to talk myself out of a job, but they're your own people.
Right. For sure. And I wanna know from your perspective, how do people differentiate between many environments that I'm in, we're very undermanned,
Mhm.
and um, sometimes there's really nothing that the people like myself in middle management can do about the fact that we need more people. So you have decisions to make. You either dial down the services, or you run yourself ragged and you stress your people out, or you just have to have those honest conversations about what you will and you won't take on. How do you work with a culture that has those challenges that they're not for things that they cannot control and things they can't fix?
With pretty much all of this, whether it's good or bad cultures, I'm going to have them go back to their core values, like their mission, their vision, and values. Because if they were established correctly in the first place and mean something, that's something that you always kind of should revert back to. And if we can figure out what those are and align with them, make our strategic goals align with them, because those are standards that should be set, and a lot of actually like the military is better at that, but a lot of civilian companies don't realize that when you have these like values that you've created, you can use those to create standards in which you hold people to, you hire and fire people to, and things can kind of, you have now a guideline, and
Mhm,
without that guideline you're kind of just all over the place willy-nilly, and that I think is a way to set a good standard so that everyone is held accountable in the same way so that it's fair as well.
mhm. Yeah, it is tough to run an office or an organization if you haven't put out any kind of initial, direction and guidance, and so that's what we call it at NATO, D&G, and I find those types of documents to be very helpful, especially if they give a little bit of insight about what that leader prioritizes and finds important. Because if I know what my boss is focused in on, I can work to try to meet that need. But if I don't know, like I have to just figure out through trial and error, it just makes it harder
Right.
to build that rapport than if they just told me up front. We call it in the Navy like give me a rock. No, don't give me a rock. Give me this, give me that. And then you're going down this road where you're just giving your boss a million things and you don't even know if the thing that you're giving them is exactly what it is that they want. So setting those expectations up front about what the deliverable is, I think is so important.
Right. Because what's that thing lately I've really been hearing that I love is like um, something about expectations, like managing expectations is
Mhm.
huge. And I feel like a lot of employees are set up for failure because of this, in these managers' inability to um, under give them what these expectations are from the beginning. There shouldn't be any confusion. Everything should be very black and white.
Mhm.
There shouldn't be confusion. So if these things that we're talking about can help mitigate a lot of issues. Um, the hiring and firing thing, especially in the civilian world, even military recruiting, we should be hiring and firing again off of these situations, and um, we're not.
No, no, we're not. We are the thankful thing that I do hold on to when it comes to the military is I feel like we are a learning organization, and as I've seen with a lot of the things that have happened in the military in the 27 years that I've been in, we've had a lot of shifts that I think are good. We've embraced diversity. People can think however they want one way or the other about the woke issue, but ultimately, I think we are better because we have so much more of a diverse workforce than we did when I joined
Oh,
27 years ago. And I think that only makes us more strong as an organization. We have a less of a stigma on mental health treatment and getting counseling and things like that. There was no way you could ever say I'm going for a therapy appointment
right.
10 years ago. You would just get ostracized. Now it's just considered like a doctor's appointment. Nobody bats an eye when you say that's what you're doing. So I think there's been some really great changes within the organization, but like any organization, we still have a long way to go. And that's truth. Thurston King, he just said this. He said a lot of people withhold information in organizations because they think they are preserving their job security.
There's a lot of like hoarding information, and we've seen that in the military as well, and it's just toxic and it doesn't help anything. But I wanted to tell you that I really appreciate your um, transparency with mental health and the things that you've dealt with prior to the service and in the service, because you as a leader, you saying all these things, it's going to help all your sailors not feel alone and feel like comfortable to make those appointments to go get seen and things like that. Whereas, like you said before, me and you have seen 15 years ago that like if that happened, you asked to go to mental health, we all thought we were going to get kicked out.
We did. And, I didn't seek any kind of intensive treatment, the kind that I'm in now. I never did what I'm doing now or this kind of work because I knew what an investment of time it would be. But number one, most importantly, I was afraid of the way my leadership would respond if I sought this out. And also, I wasn't sure I could find somebody that I would trust well enough to understand this kind of trauma.
Mhm.
I had in my mind that the only kind of trauma that was okay was you've been shot at in combat or you've been abused physically or sexually. In my
Mhm.
mind, there was no other kind of trauma. And now, one thing I do like about the fact that we're talking about toxic work environments is that toxic work environments are just as traumatic, and so is childhood trauma. I mean, my therapist said the other day that even somebody who's been shot at in combat, the people that are going to get PTSD are the people who have had previous childhood trauma. They are that much more likely, like
Mhm.
something like expeditionally more likely to suffer from PTSD from those incidences than, let's say, some others who've experienced combat and a combat environment, but
Mhm.
didn't have that childhood trauma. And
Right.
so it really brought home to me what I had been through and the things that I experienced, and it validated
Mhm.
my story. And that was just, I mean, like I said, I'm only in about month 2 now, but I
Mhm.
go every week, and it has made me it's made me better. I mean, honestly, like it's all of a sudden just given me explanations for things that I have never truly thought about, things about power and the relationships with women that I've had in the past that weren't where I
Mhm.
wanted them to be. Everything just kind of clicks now. And yeah, that's why it's so important to get this kind of help.
Yeah, I'm so glad you are. I'm all about therapy. I've been to all the therapies, and it has definitely helped me as well. And when I was a flight attendant in the Air Force for the Secretary of Defense, I was that much more worried because I had a really high security clearance. So I'm sitting there like, it's
Yeah.
so taboo. Yeah, I'm going to lose my job, the special duty. Like I can't go. I eventually ended up having to because. Um, Long story short, I had a domestic abuse situation in my marriage back then, blah, blah, blah. And I just was going to snap, crackle, pop. uh,
Right.
so
Yeah,
I
you
had,
had to.
but everyone was actually really supportive. And that was back in 2013 ish. And so, like you said, I'm just glad the stigma is going away on the mental health situation. But corporate Stockholm syndrome is very real, and even in the corporate, whether it's corporate, military, or whatever, that type of syndrome is real, where things are so bad that you just get to the point where this is normal. What do
Mhm.
what do you mean? And I that NASA subcontractor I worked for, there was a ton of people there that had literal corporate Stockholm syndrome. They were empathizing with their captor, which was that CEO. It was nuts. Like, and I was just watching this, like, this is real life. I only lasted 7 months there before I pulled chocks, but it was crazy. And then the ship went down. That company doesn't even exist anymore, which is ironic. And um, he had some of those people go down with him to the
Oh
death.
yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I'm sure, because when someone is that, like you say, narcissistic, they're usually also very charming and they're very effective in certain areas. And those certain areas that they're effective at are able to mask the
Mm-hmm.
things that they are doing to others. And so what you find is that there are only certain people who will see what's going on, and so they don't want to face it. They don't want to deal with it because it's hard. It's really hard to speak up, because it's a power issue, other things. And so it's better just to pretend like things are going, it's easier rather in their minds, harder later on, of course, to just pretend like everything's okay.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, because I think that there are so many environments in the military that could benefit from counseling and from like people like yourself coming in, when things aren't going right, and fixing those environments. It's not enough just to fire the bad boss or hold the bad boss accountable, or send all the people to mast and do the investigations that drag on forever. They might drag on, whatever. um, that's not going to fix the problem. The problem is that the work culture needs that counseling and that environment, that love and care, and a lot of times they're just not going to get that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, even that my boss, which was his right hand, VP, like, she did her best to shield us, but even still, he'd be firing whole entire engineering departments because he didn't like what they said. It was like crazy, and there's only so much that you can do. And there's a lot of people, especially in the military, who do not understand this concept that, like, you can only do so much. You don't have the power that you think you have.
No, you don't.
Like, I don't know
No.
where they get this false perception that they have this power they don't have, especially when they get in on the civilian side of things. Like, you can do your best to, and I applaud you for that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you're not a good leader because you don't have the power that you wish you had.
Right, and honestly, you do not inspire people to wanna work for you with a heavy hand. When
Mm-hmm.
you have a heavy hand and you're controlling, people will recoil at you asking them to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just this very delicate balance of, is this a job that I have to take as a leader? Like, is this a job that's more in my lane? Is this a job that I can delegate? Can the person that I'm delegating to, do they have the bandwidth? Do they have the resources? Do they have the time? Do they have what else is going on in their lives that may prevent them from being able to do that job? And in the military, it's not like you don't just fire people. That's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
It is on you as the leader to learn how to inspire and to motivate. And the best way that I know how to do that is hopefully by setting the example, and
Mm-hmm.
going in there every day, trying to do my best. Some days I get it right, some days I make mistakes, but that's the only way that I think you're going to get people to do things. Because, like you said, Brittany, you really don't have as much power as you think you do just because you're in charge. That is,
Right.
that is a huge lesson that I've learned.
Sadly, I mean, same, because like I almost was mad at her. Like, how are you not, like,
Hmm.
how can you see this? And like, she knew, but she just was trying to put on a good face and try to save us at the same time. But if he wanted to fire someone, they were done, and she had no. You have no power here, And so
Hmm.
I learned that
Yeah.
lesson. Lots of lessons learned on what not to do. Um, but again, I also have had a ton of amazing leadership in my career. When I was with Pratt and Whitney, I had great leadership. When I was in certain parts of the Air Force, I did too. But I've learned a lot from both sides of the fence, and from the mental health aspect, that in that toxic place, I got out of that. I became toxic in that environment, and I'm not normally a toxic person. There's so much negativity around me that and seeing everything, I became toxic, and I ended up actually apologizing to my coworkers, like hitting them up after the fact, like, yo, I'm sorry I was so toxic, because I became kind of crappy, because
What do you mean? Like, what were you doing that was crappy?
I was always complaining, like, about everything. Like, everything is so crap. Like, this is just, I can't believe this. This is
Just very negative. Yeah.
very negative. And I felt bad, because I became part of a different problem, because some people were just trying to stay afloat, and I'm sitting there always calling out the crap when I should have just quit a long time ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
type deal. But
Yeah, typically though, it's nice though that you didn't turn it on yourself. I mean, that's what I do when an environment is toxic. I turn it on myself and I say, "Well, what am I doing wrong?" And then it really gaslights me to a place where I start to regress and I start to become a person who's not confident in my abilities, confident in myself, and it is so damaging. And I had to really unpack that after my last job because I left an environment that I wasn't altogether happy in. And I would definitely define some of the people in there as being toxic.
mhm,
And it really was the one time, and it was the turning point for me that said, okay, I've got to get a handle on this. I don't care what happens with my career. I've did what I needed to do in the Navy one way or the other. And yes, I had to be to a place where I felt safe with retirement to do this, which is what I just needed to feel
mhm,
safe. But at that point, I just said, you know what? I want to become a better person. I'm going to be a better person or I'm going to be a better person as a retiree and as a veteran.
mhm.
And that's where I came to the place where I am now, and seeking the care that I presently am in. Because at some point it really is about your health, and your health. I tell this to my people all the time. Your health becomes your entire rest of your life. Your
Mhm.
job is not your entire rest of your life.
Yeah,
So you have to
very true.
prioritize between your job and your health. I tell my people all the time, put your health number one. You have to.
Mhm.
And if you have to quit the job, you have to quit the job. You have to take a leave of absence, you take a leave of absence. It's what you have to do to take care of yourself for the rest of your life.
Right? I mean, no one's, as sad as it sounds, no one's going to look out for number one better than number one.
Absolutely. And I think we all want to be around people who prioritize their health and their welfare, not at the expense of others, but in a way that is productive to the environment. Because when you come into the environment and your mind is healthy, your body is healthy, you give more to the organization. So
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about how you started your business to shift gears and decided to do the marketing that you did. That's another thing that's so impressive about you, Brittany, is not only you're in this, like I said earlier before the call, you're in this niche field with consulting organizations and working on culture, which I think is just amazing.
Thank
But
you.
you're also so active on LinkedIn and you're so good at marketing and telling stories. How did you get into that?
Thank you. I was on LinkedIn after I got out of the Air Force, very randomly, sporadically, and uh, maybe a few years before COVID, I just started posting about my stories and just of good, bad leadership and different whatever, and it started to get traction. And my father is a published writer; he's very good. So thankfully, I kind of inherited maybe some of that writing stuff. And he
Mhm.
also he the way he speaks is the way he writes, so that's kind of how I am as well. And I was just getting traction. I'm like, oh, I guess people want to actually hear this stuff. So I just kept it going, and it seemed I had very relatable stories, especially in the military space. So I started getting a following of veterans, and then it just, I don't know, it just kind of blew up in a comparatively, but like
Mhm.
I just enjoy the stuff I get in my inbox that's like I don't feel alone now, or like people feel seen, like they're not just alone in some of these environments, and stuff like that, and it keeps me going. Some people have literally inboxed me more in the recent years that like they've quit their job and they're so much happier, and it's because of the things and the stories I posted. This is coming from them. I never
So
thought
cool.
yeah,
Wow.
and it like fills my cup and makes my heart explode, because
Woo.
I don't want people to be miserable. And so getting things in the inbox like that I've being so candid and blunt and whatever has given people the courage to quit these, toxic jobs, is great for me. even if like didn't get clients. I mean, even if um, I didn't have this business, if that's what comes out of all this, then I still feel like it was all worth it.
I feel the same way, Brittany. Like, I don't have a business now, but the emails, I get similar emails, not so much I quit my job because of you, but more like I'm so glad that you're sharing on things that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
And then I get people who write me and say, "Yeah, I had a family member with a complicated past and this and that." And it just it's so refreshing because so much of what you see on social media, and I say this all the time, is like the perfect life. My life is great.
Mhm.
Everybody's happy. And there are amazing times in my life where I feel that way. And I get why people like to post on that stuff. People want to stay positive and they want to stay in a good mood. But I believe that there's also space and room for us to always keep a perspective on the times when things aren't so great and talk about those things and just how we get through it, how we manage those things because every day is not wonderful.
Right. The
you know
toxic positivity, I feel like, is a way to have more mental health problems.
Absolutely. Like sometimes I see some of this stuff and I'm just like, oh my God, like is your life just great every single day? And all
Right.
you do is pose with all these important people every day and your life is awesome. And I can't relate to it. And I think
No.
there's going to be a backlash at some point to
Hmm.
the toxic positivity of the influencer culture
Yeah.
because I do believe there is a hunger for this authenticity that's not so polished and
Right.
perfect.
Hmm.
It's just starting to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that the influencer thing's only been around for a few years now, maybe 10 at the most.
Hmm.
But at some point, it's going to turn, and then people are going to go, wait a minute, this isn't like not everybody knows how to make a perfect reel. And
Right. Yeah.
and some people just want to share and be themselves online the same way
Mhm.
they are face to face and make connections. Some people just really want to do that.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you that I think at some point, even maybe now, it's starting to turn a little bit. And some people, they go the opposite way. They're too transparent to the point where it's like, are you really posting that? Like some stuff. Like I'm pretty open about a lot of my life, but the LinkedIn wise people think that they know me. I'm like, oh, honey, you don't even know. Like I have a whole nother side of me. And, there's that balance of like security. Me and OPSEC and things like that. Like even being out of the military, I care about certain things like that. And like there's only certain things that I post and for that authenticity thing, because I don't want to look like this cookie cutter influencer, whatever situation, because my life ain't like that. Like, nor was it or will be. So I think it's important to be authentic, but some people just go above and beyond a whole different way. Like, I saw someone that like was taking like pictures um, in it going to the bathroom and things like that. And I'm like, I don't know necessarily if that's like not that authentic. I don't
Right,
know. Some of the stuff
right.
I see.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely feel that the things that we share, they should be for a purpose. They should have some intent behind them, whether that be to inspire, to share something that you think might be relatable.
Yeah.
Um, and I think very carefully about how much I share and where I share.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that storytelling is so powerful because
Mhm.
when we share our story and we share our experiences, we heal others. We really do. Because all of a sudden you're in a room or you're even online and you're reading about somebody who has been through something that you've been through, and you go, oh shit, I'm not the only one.
Right.
Okay. Other people have been through it. They've gotten through it. It sucks, but we'll move on. and,
Mhm.
and 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 we're in this together. You just feel like you've got somebody else out there, even if it's just through a Facebook post or a message. You've got somebody out there that has been through it with you. And I think that's what social media ought to be used for, is for connection.
Yeah.
Um, so it's wonderful that you've used it that way. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like when you started this business and sort of where you are today, because this has also grown even since I've known you in the past year. It seems like it's just really exploded for you, and I'm curious at how that happened.
I I really appreciate LinkedIn and like my peoples, because I was able to continue to refine my business more and more. Like I use everything I post is rather strategic in terms of like even polls, getting information from the people to know like what's working, what doesn't working. I put myself out there to be like, hey, roast me. Like, what do you feel like you're not understanding about my business and what I do? And so I use this platform to my advantage to get this feedback from people, but you have to, I guess, have enough, I don't want to say confidence, but have enough like thick skin to
Hmm.
take, because some people tell you things that are just you're not going to listen to anyway. You want to take all the feedback if it's not constructive, you know. But
Right.
you have to be willing and open to know that you're going to get some
You
mean
are.
things said to you, but chuck it and use the rest. And so I think that again that I've just been able to refine what I do because of my own work, but also just like hearing it from the people. And I think that's really helped me just continue to niche down what exactly it is I do and make it palatable to the
I
masses.
love that. Yes. I do the same thing. You start to see within your own brand what resonates with people and what your sweet spot is.
Mhm.
And you do start to do that as you have an online presence, is that you start off with this like kind of big lofty goal of all these things you're going to talk about. And
Yeah.
then you start to narrow in and on these very things. For me, it's definitely obviously my own experiences with mental health and childhood trauma, toxic
Mhm.
work environments, anything to do with caring for anyone who's vulnerable. That's why the animal thing really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Because I love animal warriors, and I will always have a soft spot for people that are working in the animal protection community, just because I really think so much of people that are going to step outside their own humankind and say these animals need protection, and what is it that we can do to
Mhm.
elevate the care and the welfare of creatures that can't speak for themselves. And so um, that's, I think, really my niche is being hopefully that voice that can bring connection, bring awareness, bring those stories to life of ways that we're of service to to help people feel that they're not alone. But you're right, it really starts as this big thing you want to do, and you're just sharing stories, and then you start to just go, oh shoot, and then you get the feedback from people, and sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, about what it is you're doing and in ways that you could be doing it better. Can you give me an example of sort of feedback that you've taken on board, or anything that someone has said and then you're like, oh, I didn't think about it like that? Or has there ever been an example that way?
A ton. I'm just trying to like find one, but a lot of it came down to like, they appreciate what I do and said or whatever, but they're like, you're just not communicating it in a way that people are understanding the what you do and what it, like it's almost like EPRs or sorry, it's really loud outside. I have to have this
Oh,
window
no,
open. I
no, it's all
apologize.
good. That
Um,
happens.
but they were trying to like pretty much tell me like I needed to communicate the who, how, what, whatever better. Like, what am I providing? The value that I'm providing. I wasn't doing that well enough. And so I had to figure out, kind of just like I was saying with EPRs in the Air Force, like you should talk about the impact. And I wasn't really talking about the impact enough as to what happens when I do what I do. It's not just like I do what I do and woo, great work cultures. No, it's I do what I do and you can retain talent, and then here's the money and here's what you're saving and
I see.
here's what
Yep.
things like that. So more
Mhm.
qualitative
Yes.
situations.
Right. Like more like just you're sharing that narrative of what it is that people take away from what you provide. And so people understand the deliverables. And so when they hire you, they're kind of hiring with that expectation that these are the things you're going to bring to the table. And we did have a couple people come on here. Razak, he says he had done a romance scam dissertation. So I had done a show about romance scammers and a guy who gets what do you call it? His likeness is stolen to trick people, sadly. And so he's doing a dissertation on that. And then of course, Brian, my husband's best friend, is Risen Ability, and he says, "Hey." But and then I'm sorry, Nefisit also said, glad to be here. So thanks, guys, so much for joining us today. Switching gears over to kind of the future, like where do you want to see your business go, and what's next for you, Brittinay?
A lot of people ask if like I'm going to bring on consultants, and the introvert in me at this point doesn't want to.
Sure.
Like, and I've never really had this ambitious goal to have a firm, because there's a lot of like, what's that called? I have a lot of IP, and there'd have to be like non-competes and a bunch of legal stuff. And even though I talk a lot about like leadership and things like that, and teach them a lot of emotional intelligence, which ends up being leadership stuff, I don't want to have people ever again. I don't want to have employees. I don't. It's actually not something I enjoyed, even though I know how it should be done, and I think I implemented that well. When I did it, I don't like it. So,
you sound like my husband.
like even though I'm in the peopling space, I don't like people that much.
Right. Yeah. And plus you're your own entity right now. I feel the same way about podcasting. I can't imagine bringing on a co-host or any of that. I mean, it's hard for me to even imagine bringing on people that I could hire to help me. I know that it would help me spread my brand, but at the same time, it's really hard because, I feel the same way to a certain degree. It wasn't like I stepped into this role in the Navy and wanted to be this great leader. I just loved being a storyteller and wanted to make an impact. And as I moved up in the ranks, there was more expected of me in the leadership world. And so I had to learn how to be a leader. I was not a leader growing up. And so I had to learn how to lead, to be honest with you. And I'm still learning, of course. So
I think you're doing a great job. Like I said, the impact that you have, some of it you might not even know, because of how vulnerable you are. And I think that's great. And I know for a fact that all the great leadership I've had, they were great storytellers in the sense that they might have not have known that that's what they were doing. But when you bring these stories to the table of these are the things that I've been through, and it helps people, your troops empathize with you, and makes you more relatable, which, the rapport and the trust and the this and the that. Whereas, when I've had people who weren't leaders, who were my supervisors, they weren't good storytellers. It was just do this, shut up, that's it, but great leaders are storytellers, and they have a really, like, you guys are really good at what you do. So I think that there's something to be said about leadership and storytelling.
yes, and there's something also to be said about just listening. And one of the nice parts about being a podcaster is that it gives you that opportunity to really practice your listening skills and have those dialogues. And I find that the stuff that I've learned as a podcaster has really made me a better leader and a better communicator at work. That's the interesting part is I'll go up to brief now and I can tell that my briefs are different than they were before I started this 2 years ago. And that's been interesting because I'm just doing this on a computer with a little camera, but it's that practice and it's that memory of doing this every week for 2 years that I think puts me in a place where I can get up in front of a room now and I can talk in a way that I wasn't able to do before I started doing this. It's been really fascinating. And that's where putting yourself out there, like what you're doing online with these posts and all the images that you do, that's another thing. You're an incredible photographer. You're so good at how you put your posts are like work of art. Like I said, I just read your bio and I'm like, and I know good writing. And it's like, that's good writing. That's good description there. And just, I don't know, Brittinay, I just admire you so much. And I think you're just doing such good work for our community. I really do think that.
Thank you. And it's same, and I do, I guess, have that other side of LinkedIn I use to try to help in the transition military space. Sometimes they get spicy because not all of us feel the same about certain things. But I feel like we have, like us as veterans that have been veterans for a while, have to advocate for those getting out who there's just spaces in the transitioning community that I feel they use people.
Yeah.
I don't like it, and I use my platform to try to air that out. And I know I have a ton of people in DC because I see that my analytics, and there are a lot of people in DC. There are a lot of people in higher up leadership of the military. Some like me and some hate me, and it is what it is.
Yeah. And you know what? You are a controversial voice. And it's really funny because Brittany, you're not to me at all a controversial person, or you don't seem it, but you are a very controversial voice in the way that you express yourself. And I am too. So I definitely am, but in person, I'm not. Like, people who work with me would never really call me controversial, except for the fact that I probably, I speak my mind, and I
Right.
definitely push back on things sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting that it's such a saturated space with people that want the veteran transition community, with people who want to tell you the right way to transition. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some really like wonderful voices out there that
Mm-hmm.
are just killing it and doing it for the right reasons, and just,
Right.
like Power of Your Story, Sarah Carell,
Mm-hmm.
Alfredo Torres, those two just always come to mind, because
Oh yeah.
they're not making no money off doing any of this, and they're just out there all the
From the
time.
heart.
Yeah, it's totally, and they're just doing it, doing it, doing it. And and it is what it is. And so it's just one of those things where I think people know who the ones that are in there for the right reasons, like anybody else, and who are not. And
I hope so.
I do too. I think so. And thank you to David Jones. Go Teresa, love it. David is the president of Hello LLC. So if you ever see my Beacons page, his team designed that for me, and they continue to work with me. Another wonderful collaborator. So I do have a few collaborators that have helped me with my website, helped me with my some of my links. And yesterday I had a talk with Parade Deck, and they're amazing. They are now putting together a repository, and I'm giving them a plug. I'll have to let Andrew know I did that, but he sounds wonderful, putting together a repository of military podcasters and giving them a social space. And it's just a wonderful platform. I've never seen anything like it. And then Thomas Tempest, he says, very interesting session, both very relatable, having worked within the legal sector and British military airborne.
Nice.
So go UK. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And very timely, since I'm living here in the UK and I have an aviation background. So I thought that was also funny.
Yes.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but is there something else that you'd like our listeners and audience to know about you and about your work?
So I work with the startups, creating their mission, vision, values, because those are so important to that is your foundation. So I help them with that, establish businesses, the SWOT analysis, focus groups, things like that. And my favorite part about my business are these emotional intelligence workshops, because it's not just for leaders, it's for everyone. And I feel like the more that, because emotional intelligence, and like I say, my training starts within, and I feel like it really, really, really helps with mental health. It's helped my mental health drastically, because when you have this ability to be smart about your own emotions and how you take things on or off, and boundaries and things like that, oh man, it's just elevated my own mental health. And that's really the philanthropic reason for my business, is mental health, because there's no reason we have to go to work every day, wanting to throw up on our way to work because we hate it so much. It doesn't need to be like that.
No, it does. It shouldn't. I mean, we should like to be there. And we should like our coworkers. I mean, I just had a crazy last couple weeks, but it was also amazing at the same time, because I love what I do and I like my coworkers. And like, we have an international night tomorrow, and it was kind of last minute or Thursday for me to get the tickets and do it. But I said, screw it. How often am I going to get to see nearly 30 countries come together and make all these different food and do this different stuff? You got to take these opportunities when they happen. And when you have good work environments, it's something in which I am in right now, a very good work environment. It's just something you want to preserve, because You're so happy that you're in an environment where people like each other, and you're like, I just want to bottle this up and take all these life lessons and
Right.
do it right. So yeah, well, it has definitely been a pleasure, Brittinay. I know people can find you on LinkedIn. We're of course streaming this on LinkedIn, but for those of you who are joining us on YouTube or Facebook or the audio upload that I'll do later, please check out Brittinay's content and her work and her website. And if you are an organization that either is struggling or even not struggling, but just wants to get to the next level, give her a call.
Thank you so much. Please continue to do what you're doing. I think you're setting yourself up for great success. You're already had a lot of success in the Navy, and it's going to transcribe well when you get out. So continue doing what you're doing, because I feel like it's going to go really well for you when you get out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brittinay. I will meet you backstage. I'm going to go on full screen just for a moment here and say goodbye. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. I will have another show on Sunday. I will not probably, I will do shows until the end of this month. And then I go on a vacation for family for a couple weeks. And then about mid-June on, I'll start to reschedule some shows. So I'm working on that right now. But have a great week. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye now.